Hi, today what we're going to do is we're going to review the operations on rational expressions. That means adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. What we've been doing over the past couple of days on our rational expression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from a worksheet that I'll give you in class tomorrow, or maybe I even gave it to you today. And these worksheets are labeled. The first one is page 111. That's from a worksheet, like I said, that you may or may not have. It really doesn't matter. But what you need to do is just get out a sheet of lined paper so you can copy down these problems and work them out. The first one we're going to do on page 111 is question number 7, which says 25 minus x squared over 14 x cubed y to the 8th. We're going to multiply that by 7x squared y all over 8x plus 40. Now this is a multiplication problem, and just a reminder, because we've been adding and subtracting over the past couple of days, just as a reminder, when you multiply, you do not need common denominators. That's a mistake I see some people make through the years. There is no need to get a least common denominator because this is multiplication. The only time you need a common denominator is when you add and subtract. So we're really happy when we get a multiplication problem because it's a lot less work. What we're going to do with the multiplication problem, if you remember, is we're going to completely factor the numerators and denominators, and then we're going to cancel out or divide out the common factors. In this first numerator, you have the difference of two perfect squares. 25 minus x squared, remember the 25 comes first, so the 5 has to come first in the parentheses. 5 plus x times 5 minus x. Look at the 5's coming first, not the x's. This is just a monomial. 14 times x to the 3rd times y to the 8th. That can't be factored. And neither can this numerator, 7 times x squared times y. But this denominator, it's a binomial. There's a plus sign here. So we have a GCF, a greatest common factor of 8 that we can pull out. And we're left with x plus 5 after we get done factoring that. And now that everything is factored, all we have to do is cancel the common factors because it's a multiplication problem. Do not cancel across addition or subtraction, only across multiplication. So we have a 5 plus x that's exactly the same thing as x plus 5. They're just in the different order, but they're the same thing. And then we have a 7 in the numerator and a 14 in the denominator. They're factors. They can reduce down. 7 turns into a 1 and a 14 turns into a 2. Divide out the 7. The x squared on the top and the x cubed on the bottom. Well, the x squared cancels out, and the x cubed, you take 2 of those x's out of x cubed and you're left with just 1x, or x to the 1st. And in the y's, you have a y. I'll put a little 1 there because that's really y to the 1st. Y to the 1st and y to the 8th on the bottom. Well, the y to the 1st cancels out, and you subtract exponents. 8 minus 1 is 7, so this becomes y to the 7th. So this whole denominator is canceled out, and it becomes 2xy to the 7th. And then you have an 8 down in the bottom. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to write the final answer. We have a 5 minus x in the numerator here. And you can put parentheses around it, or you don't have to. It's up to you. And in the denominator, we have a 2 times an 8. Remember, this is multiplication, so 2 times 8 is 16. We have an x. And we have a y to the 7th, and that's all we can do. We can't cancel this x with that x because this is a term. Terms do not reduce or divide out. So that's the answer to that question, number 7. The next question I'm going to do from that worksheet is question number 9. Question number 9 says 2x plus 10, so copy these down, all over 32 minus 8x. We're going to multiply that by x squared minus 10x plus 24 all over x squared minus x minus 30. Well, again, multiplication does not require a least common denominator. We just factor and cancel as much as we can. 2x plus 10 has a GCF of 2, so we're left with x plus 5 after the factoring. 32 minus 8x has a GCF of 8, so we're left with 4 minus x after we pull the 8 out or divide the 8 out. There are factors of 24 that add up to negative 10. Remember, this is a trinomial, so we're looking for factors of 24. Well, there are lots of factors of 24, but the only ones that add up to a negative 10 are a negative 6 times a negative 4, so this will factor out into x minus 6 times x minus 4, factored. And then the factors of negative 30 that add up to negative 1, let's see, I think it's 6 and 5, and it would be a negative 6 times a positive 5 to give a negative 30 when you multiply and to give a negative 1 when you add. So all of these have been factored, and now we can just look for common factors to reduce down. We have an x plus 5 in the top and bottom. We have an x minus 6 in the top and bottom. We have an x minus 4 and a 4 minus x. Remember, if it's subtraction and they're in opposite orders, they will reduce down to a negative 1, and I usually put it on the top. And then the last thing we can do is take the 2 over 8. 2 over 8 reduces down to 1 over 4. And now everything's gone on the top except this 1 and this negative 1. Remember, it's multiplication, so 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And in the bottom, all we're left with is a 4 because everything else is canceled, so negative 1/4 would be the answer to that question. Now we're going to go over to another page of our worksheets, and this is from page 113. We're just going to do one problem on this page, question number 5. And this is a division question. So number 5 says 12n minus 36 over 9 minus n squared. We're going to divide that by 8n to the 5th all over n squared plus 3n. Now remember, with division, you are going to flip the second fraction. So let's just put a little note down here. We flip the second fraction upside down, which is going to be this one, and then you multiply like we did up here. So we're going to rewrite this fraction 12n minus 36 all over 9 minus n squared. Whoops, 9 minus n squared, sorry about that. And we're going to multiply this by this flipped upside down, which is n squared plus 3n all over 8n to the 5th. Remember, division turns into multiplication as long as you flip that one. So now our job is to factor everything that we can and reduce. So there's a 12 as a GCF here, so I'm going to take the 12 out, and I'm left with n minus 3. This is the difference of two perfect squares. The 9 comes first, so it has to be a 3 coming first plus n and a 3 minus n. Make sure you write it in the correct order. There's a GCF of n here, so it's n times n plus 3 after you remove one of the n's out or divide one n out. And 8n to the 5th is just a monomial, so we can't factor that at all. An n minus 3 over a 3 minus n, a subtraction in the reverse order, reduces down to negative 1. An n plus 3 and a 3 plus n, well, they're the same thing because they're addition. Remember, like 3 plus 100 is the same thing as 100 plus 3. They're the same thing, so they'll cancel out completely. Now what we're left with is we have a 12 here in the numerator and an 8 in the denominator. Remember, this is a factor, not a term. Factors can reduce, so 12 over 8. 4 goes into both of those. 4 goes into 12 3 times, and 4 goes into 8 2 times. And now we're just left with an n to the 1st on the top and an n to the 5th on the bottom. So the n to the 1st cancels out, and the n to the 5th, you take one of those n's away, and you're left with n to the 4th. That's all we can do reducing wise, so we're left with 3 times negative 1 on the top, which is a negative 3 on the top, And on the bottom, we are left with a 2n to the 4th. And that's the end of that problem. Remember, division is just multiplication if you flip the second fraction. Now the next 3 problems we're going to do involve adding and subtracting, and remember those are a little bit harder when you add and subtract because you need a least common denominator. So now we're going over to the page 119 of our worksheets. We're going to do question number 7, which I'll write down as a plus 6 over 4a to the 3rd. We're going to add to that 4a plus 3 over 12a squared. Well, remember when we add and subtract, we need an LCD, unlike the multiplication and division. And when you have a monomial denominator, what you're going to do is you're going to look at each number individually, a 4 and a 12, and find the smallest number that both 4 and 12 will go into. Well, that would be a 12. So let's write our LCD off to the side. LCD is equal to 12, and then we have an a to the 3rd and an a to the 2nd. Well, what's the smallest monomial that both a to the 3rd and a to the 2nd will go into evenly? Well, it would be an a to the 3rd. So we have to create a 12a to the 3rd in both of these denominators in order to add them. Well, if you have a 4a to the 3rd, what do you multiply it by to get up to 12a to the 3rd? I think you multiply it by 3. So you multiply top and bottom by 3. 3 times 4a cubed is 12a cubed. So that'll give you that one with an LCD. And then 12a squared times what is 12a cubed? Well, 12a squared times a will give you a 12a cubed. So if you multiply the bottom by a, you have to multiply the top by a also. And now we're going to just distribute this 3 through the parentheses. We can distribute the a through this parentheses, and when we write our final answer, it's just going to have the LCD on the bottom, which is 12a cubed. So let's distribute 3a plus 18. 3 times a is 3a. 3 times 6 is 18. And we're going to add to that, let's distribute this a. 4a times a is 4a squared, and 3 times a is 3a. So we would be done with this if we didn't have to combine some like terms. 3a plus 3a is 6a. These don't have like terms to combine, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to write the 4a squared first. 3a plus 3a is 6a. I'm going to write that second, and the 18 is all by himself, so we'll just write as 18 all over 12a to the 3rd. Well, we would be all done with that problem if we didn't have a GCF, and if we take out the GCF of 4, then, or of 2, then we can just call this 2 times 2a squared plus 3a plus 9. So I took a 2 out as the GCF. And on the bottom I have a 12a cubed that hasn't changed. Now this is a factor. This is, remember I factored it, so 2 is a factor, and a 2 in the numerator and a 12 is a factor in the denominator can reduce down. This reduces down to 1 over 6. And I think we have our final answer here, which would be 2a squared plus 3a plus 9 all over 6a to the 3rd power. And that's all we can do. We could actually, if we wanted to try to factor this out again, we could try, but 2 times 9 is 18, and there are not factors of 18, I don't believe, that add up to 3, so that's unfactorable. So we will just leave that as our final answer like that. There's nothing more we can do to reduce that down. The last couple of problems I'm going to do are from page 121 of the worksheets. So on page 121, I'm going to do question number 5. Question number 5 goes like this. 5 over x plus 5 minus 2x plus 5 over x squared plus 9x plus 20. Well, this is a subtraction problem. It requires an LCD. Ugh, means a lot of work. So in order to get an LCD, what we're going to do is we're going to factor the denominator. Well, this one can't factor, but this one can. This one factors into x plus 4. The factors of 20 that add up to 9 are positive 4 and positive 5. Now it's time to build our LCD. So let's put the LCD off to the side. What is our LCD? Well, we have to grab the x plus 5. So that's taken care of. We have to grab this x plus 4, but we don't have to write x plus 5 again because we've already got it written out. So since that's the LCD, this fraction already has the LCD. This fraction doesn't have to change, but this fraction has to multiply the top and bottom by x plus 4, so it'll look like that. So now they both have the same denominator, so when we combine these together, we're just going to write out that common denominator once. X plus 4 times x plus 5, and now we're going to take this 5, distribute it through the parentheses, and get 5x plus 4 times 5 is 20. Now remember this subtraction goes to both the 2x and to the 5, so we have a minus 2x and a 2x and a minus 5. Don't forget this subtraction goes to both of those terms. The last thing we can do is combine like terms. 5x minus 2x is 3x. 20 minus 5 is a positive 15. So we've combined those like terms. So let's write that down here below. 3x plus 15 is left on the top, and an x plus 4 and an x plus 5 is left on the bottom. And that would be complete, except we have one more thing to do. We have a GCF. There's a 3 that we can pull out of here, so let's pull out the 3, and we're left with x plus 5. So when you factor that out, you cross it out, and then we have an x plus 5 on the top and an x plus 5 on the bottom that cancel out or divide out. And so our final, we're all done now when we write it as 3 over x plus 4. And if you want to put parentheses, you can, but you don't have to. And that's the end of that problem. Let's do one more, and then we'll call it a good review session. So we have question number 7 next, which is 8 over 5d plus 4 minus 1 over 2d minus 3. Oh my goodness. We don't have any way we can factor those. So what we're going to do is we're going to build our LCD with this entire denominator. If you want to put parentheses around them, you can. This LCD will have a 5d plus 4 and a 2d minus 3. All right, because they have no common factors. So in order to get this to look like this, we're going to have to multiply the top by 2d minus 3 and the bottom by 2d minus 3. So now we have the LCD here. This again is a subtraction question. So this denominator has the 2d minus 3, but it does not have a 5d plus 4. So we'll have to tack that on, 5d plus 4, top and bottom. Let's extend this fraction out a little bit. Now what we can do is when we combine these together, we write that LCD as 5d plus 4 times 2d minus 3. And in the top, we're going to distribute the 8. 8 times 2d is 16d. 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Now here again, we got to be careful of this negative because it's like a negative 1. Negative 1 times 5d is a negative 5d, and a negative 1 times 4 is a negative 4. Let's combine like terms and write it on the next line down. 16d minus 5d. 16 minus 5 is 11. So we have 11d. A negative 24 minus 4 is a negative 28. And then on the bottom, we have a 5d plus 4. And then we have a 5d, or I'm sorry, a 2d minus 3. So I've just copied the LCD down here, and I've combined like terms, 11d minus 28, 5d plus 4, 2d minus 3. There's really nothing we can do because there's no common factors between 11 and 28. So there's no factoring we can do, there's no canceling we can do. We are done with this problem. Yay. We'll practice this some more. This was a tough one. See you tomorrow.